This is Ed, and as you can see, I'm here in San Diego. This is a photo that I took uh, last Christmas time, and as you can see, it's beautiful and festive. And that ship all lit up is the Star of India, and with all those lights, it's just beautiful against that background. With us is Ken Lloyd from the LA area, Dr. Ken Lloyd. And Rigoberto Vesquez in Mexico City. Welcome back. Jorge Flores in Miami area, right? And also Stephen Howard now in Phoenix. Welcome, Stephen.
Thank you.
And congratulations on your book launch.
Thank you.
Okay, others are either not able to come or we're expecting an immigration attorney, Tio, and hopefully she'll be able to make it. So today's topic is about Latin America and anything related to international business. The theme of nearshoring, in other words, companies building plants, countries investing in Mexico in particular, uh, is just creating a boom economy. And let's go to, pardon me, Jorge, um, business development for Latin America for LARM. And tell us what LARM stands for.
Well, we support all clients or corporative clients in their movement, expatriate worker, or establishing their entities around all Latin America, like immigration, destination services, and moving.
Yeah, and so you've been doing this a long time, and LARM is very extensive, very well known, very prestigious organization that I know things about from years ago. So how many countries are involved in this?
Well, we have coverage in 28 countries. We're trying to expand more, but until now, 28 countries that we provide services directly.
Yes, okay. And so I assume you and others congregated in Washington, D.C. this past week?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So was that productive for you?
Yeah, a little dynamic, a lot of busy meetings and knowledge that we share with all the colleagues, but what's as always a good experience there.
Yeah, that's great. Good. Well, uh, Ken Lloyd, why don't you do a self-explanation? This is Dr. Ken Lloyd, PhD in organizational development, industrial psychology. And to what extent have you been involved in Latin America?
Personally, not really very much. I mean, I've worked with companies that have had operations in various countries in Latin America, all of which worked out very satisfactorily for both parties, and certainly have found the growth in that arrangement in terms of nearshoring to be a very positive outcome. But in terms of actively involved in it, no, just working with companies, certainly working with their logistics teams as they engaged in work in Latin America. Short of that, I have not had direct experience working in Latin America or specifically with any of the nearshoring entities that have been developed over the years.
Yeah, okay. And so to what extent was your earlier books translated into Spanish? Do you happen to remember?
Oh yeah, many of them were. That's funny you asked that. Yeah, it's interesting, and you would even occasionally hear from people who've read them in Spanish. One of the books dealing with people problems and problem people at work, it had the less than pejorative or less than complimentary title called Jerks at Work, but also books on Be the Boss Your Employees Deserve and 151 Ways to Provide Employees with Recognition. Those are through Career Press some years ago, but yeah, they were translated into Spanish, and it was always nice to to get feedback from readers who read the books in those languages.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Stephen, have your books been translated into Spanish?
Not into Spanish. First book was translated into Chinese, and sold very well in China, actually. A couple of reprints there, and another one of my books is sold in India, but in English. So, but I haven't tried Spanish yet.
That's interesting. My programs are not translated into Spanish, but I welcome you to dialogue, guys, if you want to, and talk to the audience that we're trying to build in Latin America. Rigo, if you'd like to say hello and address what the theme of this program is, and then also talk about LatAm Talks, which is a broadcasting thing that you're involved with. And it's okay for you to speak in Spanish.
I would love to speak in Spanish, but probably we will take control of the entire show, Jorge and myself. So prefer if we remain in English. But I just have a question first of all for Jorge. Are you now or currently the biggest company in Latin America for destination services, or is there someone else bigger than LARM? I assume LARM is the biggest, at least in terms of offices and perhaps business representatives, but I think there are serious competitors around Latin America. What do you think, Jorge?
Yeah, in fact, this is a good question because, in my opinion, personally, and this is why the main reason that I joined in LARM 2 years ago, this is the most important company in this destination services in Latin America, and the things that they don't show as a public, like they have really presence in their location that they offers. Some other competitors say that we are in, I don't know, Guyana or Suriname or other countries like Honduras, but they don't have presence or they don't have entity. They use other third parties. So when I spoke with our clients, I tried to put in communication with our local staff and our own director so they can bring some more insights about the local know-how that other companies don't try. Yes, we have a several competitors that are good. They are trying to get in more locations, but LAN currently, I think, is the most bigger company in Latin America who provides destination services and also immigration. As you know, I love immigration affairs, and this is one of my topics that trying to progress the company in one of the most or top of the immigration providers in Latin America.
Interesting. So, Stephen, you have some experience with one of the competitors, Premier DS, is a excellent firm. I know Rita for years and years. And Danilo is a mutual friend, of course. So when you did a session with them in what's it, Mexico City some months ago or so, what were they interested in? What did they want you to address?
That's great, Ed, that you remember that. We focused on the human leadership aspect of becoming a people-centric leader, and this was their regional conference. So they had managers in from Puerto Rico, Miami, Mexico, Colombia. Those are the ones I remember. There might have been another country involved, but all their senior managers were at this 2-day management retreat in Mexico City. And so we talked about leadership, how leadership is changing, how to become a people-centric leader, how to give feedback on an ongoing basis, how to develop trust with your employees. And by the way, I actually misspoke earlier because when you asked me if any of my books had been translated, I was only thinking my own books, but if I think on the screen here, you see the book I co-wrote with Adriana, Mexican author. And is the Spanish cover up? I've got both here, but this
Just English. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Let me see if I can get the Spanish one up as well for you. So the English is called Strong Women Speak on Leadership Success and Living Well. And let me see if I can get the Spanish version up here. Yeah, there you go. I think you got both versions now. But so I didn't think about the translation because Adriana actually wrote most of it in Spanish, but part of it, the part I wrote had to be translated as well. So I do have a book in Spanish. It's the one I co-wrote with
Yeah.
Adriana.
What is that image that we're looking at there? It's a little it looks beautiful and very strong, but
It's
I don't
very
know what it is.
It's very strong. I can't tell on the screen how much of it you're seeing here. This is the third book in Adriana's series of called the Strong Women Speak series. And the first book was called When Strong Women Speak, Strong Women Listen. And the second book was Strong Women Have Beliefs and Values. And then this was the third one. All the covers were designed by a Mexican artist named Berenice LaCroix, and they have the same tonality to it. So this is a heart shape. And below the heart shape is a woman with a male kneeling over her, like giving her advice or discussing with her. And then within the heart shape are various images about life, about leadership, and particularly about living well. So it's a kind of a modern art design. It's a very strong cover, as you said.
Yeah, fascinating. Well, thanks for sharing that. Okay, now let's talk about this aspect of international, well, FDI, foreign direct investment is what that's all about. Nearshoring. In other words, taking, for instance, semiconductors or auto manufacturing as an industry and building a plant in Mexico and elsewhere, but strong in Mexico for sure, and then using the legal means cross-border into NAFTA, U.S., Canada, Mexico, with all kinds of discounts and ease of access. China, for instance, heavy duty investor into Mexico. And Sempra, which is a San Diego company, energy company, they have huge investments in natural gas ports, particularly in Baja. So what do you see happening in Mexico, Rigo, and Jorge, about the companies that are new, relatively new, or coming in the new year with factories and therefore jobs? Jorge, okay,
Oh, I
yeah.
think Rigo will be speaking first. No,
Okay. Yeah,
Igor, if you want.
Yeah,
yeah, go ahead.
sure. I think we have like a moment of pause because the president elections happened a month ago, so all projects were on hold. But now I think all economy will come back until January next year, certainly. But yeah, I think in general, Chinese companies are still coming here. And yeah, I think we're expecting a lot, but there is a lot, perhaps some uncertainty as well in terms of changing the labor. Currently, we are working about 48 hours by law in Mexico per week, and the new president is suggesting to reduce that to 40 hours, which means only 4 days per week, similar to what Sweden did in Europe. And this is gonna be a tough, a hot topic for the next year because certainly most of the people in Mexico, and I think many people around the world, want to work less and perhaps earn more money, but companies are not like very happy about it because it depends in the industry. Let's say if you're a manufacturer, let's say a car manufacturer, if the working week is reduced to 40 hours only, that will mean that probably you will need to hire more people because or pay extra time. But at the end, that increase, let's say, the final prices for the final users. So it's not like an easy thing to implement in Mexico, but certainly is bringing a lot of noise. And again, it depends on the industry. It changed when you are talking about consultancy, when you are talking about as myself as freelance, or even Jorge. I am curious about what is happening with the mobility industry, because many things are subcontracted there, but some other are provided in-house. So it's going to be very interesting, especially in the nearshoring also arena, where we in Mexico work for American companies. So we provide the services based in Mexico, and then we are like an American employees, but actually we are based in Mexico, and then this is another regime. So there are a lot of things to consider from a legal perspective, from an economic perspective, but certainly I think during the first quarter of next year, we'll see a lot of changes.
So I could see clearly the need for technical compliance educations. Yes, Stephen.
Yeah, Roberto brings up a really good point about labor, but also labor costs in Mexico are so low, and they're a very small part of the cost of the parts that are being manufactured or assembled in Mexico. The average automotive worker wage in Mexico is just $3.20 an hour, US. So 40 hours a week, 48 hours a week, it doesn't really matter. It's not going to have a huge impact. What will have a huge impact is if whoever wins the US election next week and whatever happens in Congress is whether or not tariffs are increased. And there's been a lot of chatter about the tariffs increasing on automobiles from Mexico to the United States. Mexico is the US's largest trade partner now. And automobiles and automobile parts are a huge portion of that because of, as you referenced earlier, the USMCA, the US-Mexico-Canada Agreement, which replaced the old North American Free Trading Agreement a few years ago. So it's what happens in the U.S. election. The old story of when the U.S. catches when the U.S. sneezes, Mexico catches a cold is going to be very true after next week.
Yeah, fascinating. So, Ken, would you like to comment on what we've just discussed?
Well, just furthering Stephen's point, the issue of potentially substantially increased tariffs has to be a major concern. We can't really predict what's going to come down in terms of the election, and frankly, what will actually be implemented. People make political promises on both sides of the aisle, and we wait to see what really happens. But I think that the prospect of tariffs, from everything that I've read, will be extremely disruptive for international trade, certainly for the US economy. So I think it is something that has to be monitored extremely carefully and kept in the forefront of people's minds as they think about the global economy as well as our national economy here.
Yeah, it's I don't want to use the wrong word here, but it can be frightening of what can happen here. And it's really unknown. It's a mystery. And it probably won't be finalized next week. So we'll see what happens. Depends. The polls 4 years ago and even shorter with the congressional elections 2 years ago were totally wrong. I guess people were lying to the pollsters who were asking questions, and they told them wrong information or misinformation or purposely didn't want to divulge what they were saying, and the pollsters' information was wrong. And so we'll see what happens next. Stay tuned. So we have a lot of history. We meaning people who helped me in my business pre-COVID, which was publishing, printing, and doing live meetings. Didn't do any broadcasting. Should have, but didn't. And we did several things in Latin America. Starting in '06, we produced our first Latin America meeting in Panama, and the LARM office was very helpful to me in that regard, Walter and Annalisa. And they introduced me to some of the other players, of course. And Rita Hernandez was, I think, involved in that. And that was the time when the election, the election in Panama approved spending to widen the Panama Canal and build another canal or widen it. And the the government had people come to our meeting and speak about that. And with that, we're fortunate to have that happen because it attracted several senior business leaders to come also. So it was really fascinating. And because of that, Price Waterhouse, PwC, Latin America leaders who are from Brazil in Rio and Sao Paulo, they came. And at that meeting, the PwC leader asked me to come to Brazil and produce a meeting, and they would pay for it and host it. And of course, we did that. And so in 08, 9, 10, 11, and 12, we put on meetings in Sao Paulo as well as in Rio, alternating, sometimes both. It's fascinating, actually. And so it's been some time since we have produced meetings in Mexico. Oh, yes, of course, in Mexico City with the insurance company AIG as a top sponsor. They and Ernst & Young paid for my meeting, and we held it in two places. First of all, in El Camino Real Hotel in downtown, um, beautiful old property, very traditional. And then EY out in Palenque hosted us inside their offices several times. So we look forward to coming back in and doing more. And we hope that this series creates some interest of dialogue with us. More about that later. So to what extent, Rigo and Jorge, are are you guys helping FDI, foreign direct investment, or do you wait to be hired? Or are you out there assisting the search and development, the land acquisition, and all the services that you can provide to companies considering a major foreign direct investment? Rigo?
Well, at first glance, I think there are two parts where we can be involved. Let's say, and I don't know, Jorge, if that's the case with LARM, but typically when a mobility company gets involved, it's because the business is already, let's say, in the destination country, that they already secure something. So that means that they are in the need of having services of destination service providers or movers or whatever is involved. But there is another part which is related with the planning, and this is about the regulations, about the legislations, about the immigration things, which needs to be done in anticipation. Let's say all the legal requirements you need to consider for building a company from scratch in Mexico, and all the, let's say, repercussions on, and many things where those kind of services are provided by corporates because they need more legal assistance. So it's a different, let's say, kind of business. But at the end, both services are involved, the mobility and the corporate side, and we may certainly get involved in our areas of first expertise dealing with those investors. But at the end, we invite them all, and probably they can pay us for telling them what are the pros and the cons of investing in Mexico, and provide them that crystal clear guidance so they may take the best decision in
I
time.
would think there's a grand opportunity there for expansion and doing things differently. Or what do you think
Yeah,
about
yeah.
that?
In fact, I agree with it with Rigo, and sometimes with the clients, you must be more strategic or partnership. For example, if they have something in mind that they will not accomplish in Mexico or other country, we're trying to avoid that movement or clarify some points of view about the local implementation. Or when they don't have entity in local countries that they need for movement of the person, we're trying to make other strategies. For example, employee of records, which is a new figure in Latin America. I can say this, when in other countries like, for example, in Europe or Asia, they are guest to use. But in our countries, it's like a gray area because sometimes it's prohibited or another is granted or the law doesn't say anything about it. Or in other countries, you are allowed to move people, but your entity has full about the quote of foreign workers. So I was listening to you about the Panama, and it's interesting because everybody thinks about the business and the investment and the road, but anybody prepare for the immigration and destination services when they are ongoing. So the troubles arise when the projects are running. And this is perfect example of Panama because Panama has a lot of investment, but the immigration law is not accurate. Or Chile. I remember when Chile go up and everybody is like a trending country for investment in the south, but the immigration laws doesn't work to receive investment. And I think in Mexico has a good law, but it's not prepared yet for that kind of investment or that kind of diversification of the multiple company that are going to work in Mexico. For example, just a project, technical issues, or something like that. They don't have that kind of figures that they need to have in compliance.
Fascinating, Stephen.
Yeah, it's a complicated world these days, isn't it? And I think Latin America is probably one of the most complicated as it grows and develops. I don't really have a lot to contribute to that other than I admire the folks like Rigoberto and Jorge who understand these changing and moving goalposts and I also understand how to get around some of these things. I was very fortunate. I was first an expatriate in 1980, and my company took care of everything other than, they assigned the moving company to me and they moved me and they gave me a real estate person to help me find accommodation, but didn't do anything else. And so I admire some of the, like Ed, I remember one time you had a sponsor, a person that would help expatriates buy cars in their new country, and we didn't have anything like that. I was on my own. I had to either pay for cash or find a bank that would loan me money to buy a car. So I think the mobility industry has greatly matured in 40 years since I first entered it as a customer.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Before
and
Jorge,
company, yeah.
before Jorge and Rigoberto were born, probably.
So, very interesting conversation. Um, Thank you for being on this abbreviated edition, and Latin America 12th edition will be produced sometime later in November or early December. And I'd like you to come back and perhaps reach out to somebody and invite them to join us so we could grow this conversation. Uh, the issue of FDI, foreign direct investment, is not nothing new. Um, when I launched my first publication in this corridor, if you will, that was in Boston, and that was in the late 70s. And the concept of a magazine, print magazine, describing the greater Boston communities and the school systems and the sports and lifestyles, history, of course, and turning it into a visual that was like brand new stuff. And I didn't really know what I was doing, but I had the idea back then that it was a recruitment tool as well as a service tool for people already ticketed. All right. And then needed a place to live and connect into the community. But it was actually uh, removing the myopia. Once again, not seeing the forest for the trees. The myopic problem of not understanding that it's a recruitment effort, and if that is successful, then a relocation will happen, or an investment will happen. So if the information up front is provided, then it becomes not an afterthought. It's right there in decision making, and it becomes critical. It becomes the tool. So in that magazine that I created, which didn't exist before, when rudimentary versions existed, but not from a commercial point of view, I turned it into a commercial venture. And I got the Chamber of Commerce and the Greater Boston Economic Development Corp to put information in it, and in return, they paid for copies because it had their information in it, and then they used it. Okay. And then it became a tool for land developers and people who sell, commercial real estate brokers who were selling land along the Massachusetts Turnpike. And they were going to build an extension from the suburbs into downtown. All right. And that's before it got built, or as it was getting built. And then all of that happened and the magazine was very successful financially from the first edition because it had that long view. And so, and then all the companies used it. And I sold that business and moved to LA and did the same thing. I, in advance of the relocation, I flew out, walked into the LA Chamber of Commerce, cold call, and asked to speak to the manager or president or whatever. And the secretary came out, I'll never forget this, this is in 1979. She said, well, what do you want? And I was in a suit and tie. And so I told her what I wanted to do, and I needed help. And this is the Boston edition. And, well, I'm going to do LA, but I don't know a thing about LA. And so I need help. So maybe you could partner with me, and I'll give you a good price on whatever you're going to do. I could have said free, but wasn't that stupid. So anyway, they bought into it provisionally. I had to produce it first, and then they would buy and fund. And I did. And then they did. And so the LA edition, which I call California Bound, became a major success. And at that time, President Reagan was president, and he was going to build up the Defense Department, and all of that was based in California, of course, Boeing and Hughes Aircraft and others. And but interest rates were 18% at the time. And so the only people who could afford to buy houses were relocated people. And so we had a relocation recruitment tool, and the LA Economic Development Corp, in partnership with the LA Chamber, bought thousands of copies, and they used it as a tool, getting it out through commercial realtors, commercial land developers, as well as residential. And that's foreign direct investment, but on a domestic basis. It's the same idea upfront. And that's what's needed now, is partnering with the local people from the get-go to make it easier for foreign direct investment to happen in Mexico and in Latin America or anywhere. And that's the driver really behind what I'm trying to do. Thought I'd share that because it fits right in. Yes, Stephen?
No, it's great. Great story. Thank you, Ed. If we have time, could we get Rigoberto to tell us what the background of Dia de los Muertos, which is on Saturday, the Day of the Dead celebrations in Mexico, because it's such a unique festival. I think your audience would love
That's
that.
a great idea. Great idea.
Yeah.
I know a little bit about it, but I will yield to the gentleman from Mexico to talk to us about that.
Well, I think you are not the only one who is curious about it, Stephen. Mainly my American acquaintances always ask me about it, and yeah, I think it's very interesting because we have absorbed part of the American culture in terms of the Halloween, and then we now mix the Mexican part with the American part, and it's just a kind of mix. But actually today, my son and my wife are celebrating the Dia de Muertos in their schools because my wife is teacher and my son is 7 years old, and then both were wearing their customs. But basically the main idea it's connected with the fact that we celebrate, so to say, the dead people and our ancestors in a very respectful way by putting a photograph of their or for family, or even it could be a dog or a thing, whatever you admire when this thing was alive or this person was alive. It's a matter of celebrating and put it in a table and perhaps put a candle and then respect that moment of the dead. So it's certainly a connection with the dead in terms that we are perhaps one of the few cultures that we live with the dead, and we are very aware that death live with us. But I will not have enough time, Stephen, to explain how the celebrations change from one city to another. Some cities in Mexico, let's say Michoacan, they take like 4 or 5 days to celebrate that. And there's even documentaries on Netflix about it. And they are amazing, amazing, super interesting the way they celebrate. They spend, I think, in many cities they spend a whole night in the cemetery. Is that where you bury people, and in that night all people sing the songs that the dead people like when they were alive. They have celebrations, they have mariachis, they have many bands with Mexican music. So it's a huge cultural, let's say, heritage that we celebrate. But yeah, it's like I mean, it's very interesting. Personally, I don't celebrate it at all, but I do like and admire.
So
So
it's a celebration of life
Yes.
rather than a mournful thing.
that's like the paradox, right? It's
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, we are all together at the end. But yeah, I mean, if you ask me who should you celebrate the most, I will certainly celebrate my brother, that he passed away like 10 years ago, but he was like my father. So I truly admire him, but I don't like at all this tradition, because when I remember him, perhaps I get sad.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I mean, is there is someone who should deserve my respect, will be my brother.
Jorge?
So yeah, it's
No,
it's nice. Yeah.
no, it's interesting because even if we are sharing about Latin American cultures, I'm from the South, so we don't celebrate Halloween or Dia de los Muertos, but it's interesting when you are aware about the Mexican importance about this day and this kind of thing that death is part of life, and you need to be aware of that. And despite of this, you need to be respectful all your past family and colleagues and yes, family. So it's very interesting. Always we try to learn more about the Mexican traditions about this Dia de los Muertos, because in South America we don't celebrate Halloween or Dia de los Muertos, and here in the United States everybody thinks that we celebrate that kind of festivity, and we didn't know.
Fascinating.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it was popularized in the US with the Pixar movie Coco.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
So, yes, go ahead.
no, I see now that in the US there is a lot of punking events where many people, I don't know, they put a lot of customs in their houses and then they ask for trick or something. The little children get fascinated with that. But I don't know if it happens in all the US. I mean, certainly the US is also huge, and there are many things in all the regions. But yeah.
So Joanne and I used to have a house in Old Town, San Diego. You know, San Diego is 8 miles from Tijuana border. Okay, so Old Town is a big deal, and so and now it's a tourist area and there's a state park, you know, connected with it, and the original Presidio from way back when, a replica of it is as it's in a big like national park in San Diego, uh, right in the Old Town area. So they have festival, uh, the Day of the Dead, the celebration, all over the ground. And the area where there's now Italian restaurants and Mexican restaurants and, you know, Old Mexican Cafe is there, and the police station is there as well, and some office buildings. All of that is built on what used to be burial grounds. And you can walk along the street and it's commemorated in cement, you know, in writings. And so now, you know, starting tonight here in San Diego, in Old Town in particular, uh, it's all festive and big crowd, and the bars are open. So that's how I know about that. And it was fascinating because, you know, when we first moved into that area, that was in say 05, 2005. We didn't know anything about that. It was Halloween or something to do like Cinco de Mayo, I mean, which is a celebration of Pacifico and Modelo. But now it's really cultural. It goes way deep. Fascinating to have you guys on the show and to learn about it from your views. Thank you, Stephen, for
Yeah, no, I think it's a fascinating and every family does it uniquely. It's you know, has some basic to it. It's kind of like everyone has not everyone, but most people, a Christmas tree, but the way they decorate their Christmas tree would be different here with the altar. So for instance, Adriana's father passed away a few years ago, and what people put on their altars is what that person liked most or did most in their life. So she goes out and buys the 3 newspapers that he read on almost a daily basis, and she puts those newspapers on his altar. I bought a San Francisco 49ers scarf one time in San Francisco because he's a huge 49ers fan, and she puts that on the altar. And you know, if you know the particular beer he liked or the rum or tequila, you would put those on the altar, and favorite cookies and whatever. So everything becomes very personalized, which is a really unique tradition. Rigoberto, thank you for sharing with us. I thought it's just I love the event and the way people celebrate it. So I thought it was worth sharing.
well, Ken, we didn't think anything would happen with this show about an hour ago, and here we are. This is a great conversation.
Well,
Thank
in
you.
every respect, it's just a beautiful celebration. I mean, visually and spiritually. Um, I'd always been taught that those who've passed away still live on in the hearts of those who cherish their memory and in the acts of goodness that they performed when they were here. And I truly sense the presence of past family members. Sometimes I'll get a reminder, sometimes in a dream, and sometimes we, if you will, honor the date on which they passed, and it brings them back. So I certainly believe in such a different way, and yet a very parallel way, that they're with us. and we're honoring them. We are living with the memory and the guidance and the thoughts and the hopes and dreams that they shared in their lives. I think, again, thanks for bringing up the topic, Stephen. I think it's so important, and talk about humany. What could be more human than this kind of understanding and belief? So, and thanks again to Rigoberto and to Jorge for beautiful descriptions and thoughts regarding this important event.
Well, that's also why I like it, Ken, because I think, and I'm not 100% sure, but when the Spanish took over Mexico, they brought the Catholicism with them to the country. And of course, November the 2nd is the Day of the Souls in the Catholic tradition. And in the Mexican tradition, and again, this is not celebrated throughout Mexico. This is only part of Mexico in the early days. I think it's like in Yucatan, they do something different, similar but different. But it's interesting that they were able to merge the indigenous Dia de los Muertos concept with the Catholic Day of the Souls concept after the Spanish left. And they just merged the two cultures together and said, this is it.
Fascinating. Thanks, guys. Come back again.
Thank you, Ed. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks to all of you. Take